I spent months renovating Mom's place. Then she demanded triple the cost, so I moved out fast. It all started about 8 months ago when my lease was ending at my apartment. I'd been living there for 3 years, but the landlord decided to sell the building, so all tenants had to move out. The rental market in our area was insane at the time. Prices had shot up by like 30% since I'd last looked. While stressing about this over dinner with Mom one Sunday, she mentioned the small guest cottage on her property that had been sitting empty for years. It was my grandparents' old place before they passed. Mom had used it for storage and let it fall into disrepair. "You know," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose, "if you're willing to fix it up, you could stay in the cottage. It needs a lot of work, but with your DIY skills, I bet you could make it nice." I've always been good with my hands. Built furniture, redone bathrooms, that kind of thing. I even did some side gigs helping friends with home improvement projects. So this seemed perfect. "What kind of arrangement were you thinking?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Mom took a sip of her tea and smiled. "Well, if you pay for materials and do all the work, you can live there rent-free for 3 years. That should more than cover your investment. After that, we can figure something out. Maybe a small rent just to cover utilities." I couldn't believe my luck. "Are you serious? That would be amazing." "Of course. It's just sitting there anyway, and you'd be doing me a favor fixing it up. Plus, I'd love having you closer." We talked more about it that evening. The cottage needed everything. New kitchen, bathroom renovation, flooring, paint, even some minor structural work. But the bones were good, and Mom was right. It would be perfect for me. The next weekend, I went to check it out properly. It was in worse shape than I remembered, but nothing I couldn't handle. About 700 square feet total, with 1 bedroom, a small living area, kitchen, and bathroom. Perfect for a single person like me. I took measurements, made lists, and estimated costs. All in all, I figured I'd need to spend around $15,000 on materials, plus hundreds of hours of my own labor. But considering I'd save at least $1,200 a month in rent for 3 years, it seemed like a no-brainer. "So we have a deal?" I asked Mom as I showed her my plans and budget. "Absolutely," she said, giving me a hug. "I'm so excited to see what you do with the place. I should have gotten it in writing. That's what everyone tells me now. But who asks their own mother for a written contract?" I trusted her completely. So I dove in. For the next 6 months, I worked on the cottage every evening, after my day job, and all weekend long. It was exhausting but rewarding. I completely gutted the bathroom and kitchen, installed new fixtures, cabinets, and appliances. I tore up the old carpet and put in beautiful laminate flooring throughout. I repaired walls, painted everything, and even built custom shelving. Mom would come by occasionally to check on my progress, always full of praise. "I can't believe how different it looks," she'd say, running her hand along the new countertops I'd installed. "You're so talented." "It's coming along," I'd reply, trying not to show how much her approval meant to me. About 5 months in, Mom started bringing her friend from her book club around to see the place. This friend, a woman who'd recently moved to town, always had this calculating look in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. "You could get top dollar for a place like this," she told Mom one day while I was installing the kitchen backsplash. "Especially with the housing market these days." I didn't think much of it at the time. Just making conversation, right? As the renovation neared completion, I started bringing over my stuff, excited to finally move in. The place looked amazing, better than I'd even imagined. Modern, comfortable, with tons of smart storage solutions I'd designed. I'd put my heart and soul into this place, not to mention almost every penny of my savings. The day before my official move-in, Mom asked me to come over to the main house to discuss some details. I figured she wanted to talk about utilities or something similar. I couldn't have been more wrong. "So," she said, sitting at her kitchen table with a notepad in front of her, "now that the renovation is complete, we need to discuss compensation." I felt confused. "Compensation? For what?" "For the significant increase in property value you've created, of course." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My friend, you know, the one who's in real estate? She says the cottage is now worth at least $45,000 more than before." A sinking feeling started in my stomach. "Okay, but that wasn't our arrangement. You said I could live there rent-free for 3 years in exchange for the renovation." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Well, that was before I realized just how much value you'd add. It wouldn't be fair for me to miss out on that, would it? What exactly are you saying? I asked, my voice tight. She slid the notepad toward me. On it, she'd written a figure. $45,000. This is what I think would be fair, she said. 3 times the cost of materials you put in. You can pay it as a lump sum, or I can break it down into monthly rent at $1,500. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. $1,500 a month? That's more than I was paying at my old apartment, and way more than what places like this rent for around here. But this is newly renovated, Mom insisted. Top of the line, everything. My friend says I could easily get that on the open market. Your friend, I repeated, the pieces finally clicking. She put you up to this, didn't she? Mom had the decency to look slightly embarrassed, but she stood her ground. She simply helped me understand the financial implications. I'm not getting any younger, and I need to think about my future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, we had an agreement. I spent 6 months of my life and all my savings fixing up your property. I turned it from a worthless shack into something valuable. And now you want me to pay you for the privilege? Don't be so dramatic, she said. I'm simply asking for my fair share of the value you created. On property I own. I stood up, shaking with anger and betrayal. This isn't right, and you know it. I'll need some time to think about this. Don't take too long, she called after me as I walked out. I could find another tenant by next week if needed. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. How could she do this to me, after all the work I'd put in? After our clear agreement? I felt sick to my stomach. That night, I barely slept. I kept going over our original conversation in my head, wishing I'd insisted on putting it in writing. But who expects their own mother to try to swindle them? The next morning, I called my friend who works in real estate law. Technically, it's her property, he said after I explained the situation. But you might have a case for something called promissory estoppel, or unjust enrichment, since you relied on her promise and put significant resources into improving her property. What would that involve? I asked. Honestly, a lawsuit against your own mother. It could get ugly and expensive, with no guarantee of winning. Great. Just great. I also called my aunt, Mom's sister, to get her take on the situation. I can't believe she would do this to you, Aunt said, sounding genuinely shocked. This isn't like her at all. It has to be that new friend of hers putting ideas in her head. What should I do? I asked, feeling desperate. Have you tried talking to her again? Making her see how unfair this is? So I tried. I went back to Mom's house that evening, hoping for a rational conversation. But she was even more entrenched in her position. I've been thinking, she said. The cottage is actually worth even more than I initially thought. The rent should really be $1,700 a month. I couldn't believe my ears. Are you serious right now? You're raising the rent before I've even moved in? After I spent 6 months renovating the place for free? Not for free, she corrected. In exchange for living here. Which you're welcome to do, at the market rate. This isn't the market rate. And this wasn't our agreement. Well, things change, she said coolly. This is business. Business? I'm your child, not your business partner. Don't be so sensitive. If you can't afford it, just say so. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. Mom, one last time. Are you really going to go back on our agreement, after everything I've done? She looked me straight in the eye. The agreement was made before I understood the value of what we were discussing. I'm simply adjusting to reflect reality. In that moment, I made my decision. Fine. I won't be moving in. I'll be out of your hair by tomorrow. She looked surprised for a split second before recovering her composure. Don't be hasty. Where will you go? That's not your concern anymore. I turned to leave, then paused. Just so we're clear, everything I installed in that cottage that isn't a permanent fixture belongs to me. I have the receipts for everything. What? No, you can't just take things out now. That would damage the property. Actually, I can. I paid for them, they're mine. Check with your real estate friend if you don't believe me. I walked out, my heart pounding but my mind suddenly clear. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. First, I called a lawyer friend for a quick consultation. I explained the situation and asked specifically about what items I could legally remove from the property. Anything that's not permanently attached to the structure, he confirmed. Appliances, light fixtures, hardware, as long as you can remove them without damaging the property itself, and you have proof you purchased them. Next, I called a buddy with a truck and another friend who owed me a favor from when I helped renovate his bathroom. I explained the situation, and they were immediately on board to help. "Your own mom tried to screw you over? That's cold, man," my truck-owning friend said. "What time do you want us there tomorrow?" "Early, before 9 a.m. if possible. I want to be done before Mom has a chance to try anything else." That night, I gathered all my receipts and organized them meticulously. I also took detailed photos of everything in the cottage, partly to have a record of my work, but also to document the condition of everything before I started removing items. As I sorted through the receipts, the total amount I'd spent hit me all over again. $15,372.88 on materials alone. Not to mention hundreds of hours of my own labor, all to be repaid with betrayal. Bilusaf los fahli. I went to bed with a mixture of sadness and determination. The relationship with my mother would never be the same after this, but I wasn't going to let her take advantage of me. Not anymore. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My friends arrived at 8:30, and we got to work immediately. I had a clear plan of what could be removed without damaging the structure. The refrigerator, stove, microwave, and dishwasher from the kitchen, all the light fixtures I'd installed, the bathroom vanity, mirror, and shower fixtures, the ceiling fans, even the custom floating shelves I'd built and installed with removable brackets. We worked efficiently, carefully removing each item and loading it into the truck. I was meticulous about not causing any damage to the walls or floors. This wasn't about revenge. Not yet, anyway. This was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. We were about halfway through when Mom's car pulled into the driveway. My friends and I exchanged glances but kept working. Mom burst through the door, her face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. I barely looked up from unscrewing a light fixture. "Exactly what I told you I would do. Taking my property. You can't do this. This is destruction of property. I'll call the police." "Go ahead," I said calmly, holding up my phone. "I've got all the receipts right here showing I purchased these items. Plus, my lawyer friend confirmed that anything not permanently attached to the structure belongs to me. But this will ruin the cottage. Who's going to rent a place with no appliances or fixtures?" I finally turned to look at her directly. "That sounds like a business problem to me." Her face paled as she realized I was throwing her own words back at her. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "I'm your mother." "Yes, you are. Which is why your betrayal hurt so much more." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by indignation. "Fine," she snapped. "Take what you want, but don't expect any help from me when you have nowhere to live." "I don't," I replied simply, turning back to my work. She stood there for another minute, perhaps expecting me to back down. When I didn't, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My friends looked at me with concern. "You okay?" one asked. I nodded, though I felt anything but okay. "Let's just finish this." By noon, we had removed everything I legally could. The cottage now stood stripped of all the features that had made it so charming and functional. The kitchen had no appliances, the bathroom was bare bones, and even the light fixtures were gone, leaving just the basic wiring capped and safe. As we loaded the last items into the truck, I took one final look around. 6 months of work, transformed from a showpiece back into a shell. It was heartbreaking, but I knew I'd made the right decision. My friends helped me move all the items into a storage unit I'd rented that morning. Then they took me to crash on one of their couches until I could figure out my next move. "What are you going to do now?" asked my friend as we unloaded the last of my personal belongings into his spare room. I sighed heavily. "Find a new place to live, I guess, and figure out what to do with a truck full of high-end appliances and fixtures." "Man, I still can't believe your mom would do this to you." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Me neither." Later that evening, I drafted a formal letter to my mother. I outlined our original agreement, documented the value of materials I'd purchased and labor I'd invested, and listed all the items I had reclaimed. I concluded by stating that I considered our business relationship terminated, and that any further communication should be directed through my lawyer friend, whose contact information I included. It felt cold and impersonal, nothing like how a child should communicate with their parent. But she had been the one to turn our relationship into a business transaction. I was just following her lead. As I lay on my friend's couch that night, I wondered if Mom was sitting in her house realizing what she'd done. Was she regretting her greed? Or was she already calling contractors to get quotes on replacing everything I'd taken? Either way, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to be the one to back down. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. The next morning, my phone blew up with messages and missed calls from Mom. I didn't read or listen to any of them. Instead, I forwarded them to my lawyer friend, who texted back almost immediately. Nothing of substance here, just emotional appeals and some veiled threats about suing for, quote, property damage. Don't engage, you're in the clear legally. I spent the next few days in a fog, crashing on my friend's couch and trying to come up with a plan. Apartment hunting in this market was going to be a nightmare, especially since I'd spent so much of my savings on the renovation. I needed to figure out what to do with all the appliances and fixtures sitting in storage, and I needed to find a permanent place to live. My friend found me staring at my laptop one evening, browsing overpriced apartments with a look of defeat. You know, he said, casually leaning against the doorframe, my cousin's landlord just finished converting his garage into a studio apartment. It's small but brand new, and I think he's still looking for a tenant. My ears perked up. Seriously? Where is it? About 15 minutes from here. Not the best location, but the price is reasonable. Want me to put you in touch? I practically jumped off the couch. Yes, please, like right now. 2 days later, I signed a lease on the studio apartment. It was indeed small, just about 500 square feet, but it was clean, new, and most importantly, affordable. The landlord seemed like a decent guy, nothing like the corporate management company at my old place. It's not fancy, he said, handing me the keys, but it's solid construction. I did most of the work myself. I looked around at the simple but well-done conversion. Trust me, I appreciate good workmanship. This will be perfect. Then I had a thought. Actually, I have a bunch of appliances and fixtures in storage that I'm not sure what to do with. Would you be interested in buying any of them for this place or your other properties? They're all high quality, barely used. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of appliances are we talking about? I showed him photos on my phone of the stainless steel refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher I'd installed in Mom's cottage. His eyes widened. These are nice. Really nice. Way better than what I was planning to put in here. He scrolled through more photos. Light fixtures, too? And a bathroom vanity? Man, where did you get all this stuff? Long story, I said with a grimace. But they're all mine, and I have the receipts to prove it. We negotiated for about an hour. In the end, he agreed to buy the kitchen appliances, bathroom vanity, and several light fixtures for a fair price. He even offered me a discount on the first month's rent as part of the deal. I can't take all of it, he said apologetically, but I know a few other landlords who might be interested in the rest. Want me to put the word out? By the end of the week, I'd sold almost everything I'd removed from the cottage. I didn't make back the full amount I'd spent. Items like that depreciate the moment they're installed. But I recouped about 70% of my material costs, which was better than I'd expected. More importantly, I now had a place to live and enough money to furnish it modestly. It was a far cry from the beautiful cottage I'd renovated, but it was mine. No strings attached. Meanwhile, I was getting updates about Mom's situation through my aunt, who had become my main connection to that side of the family. Your mother is furious, Aunt told me during one of our phone calls. She's been getting quotes to replace everything, and apparently, it's going to cost her a fortune. I couldn't help feeling a twinge of satisfaction. How much is a fortune? Well, she was complaining that just the appliances and fixtures would be over $20,000, and that doesn't include installation. And no one wants to rent a place with no appliances, so she can't even list it until everything's replaced. I let out a low whistle. That's considerably more than the $15,000 I spent. I know. And her friend, the one who put all these ideas in her head? Nowhere to be found now that there's actual work to be done. That didn't surprise me. So what's Mom's plan now? Aunt sighed heavily. She's scrambling, talking about taking out a home equity loan to cover the costs. I tried to tell her she's being ridiculous, that she should just call you and apologize, but you know how stubborn she is. I did know. That stubbornness ran in the family. 2 weeks later, I was settling into my new place. It wasn't perfect, but it was coming together. I'd found some decent furniture at thrift stores and online marketplaces, and I'd used some of the money from selling the appliances to buy a few new things. The studio felt cozy and, most importantly, It felt like mine. Can't. I was hanging curtains when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I answered cautiously. Is this the person who did that amazing renovation on that cottage property? A woman's voice asked. I frowned, wondering if this was some kind of scam. Who is this? Oh, sorry. My name's Julie. I'm a realtor. Your landlord told me about your work and showed me some photos. I was wondering if you'd be interested in a side job. I have clients who flip houses, and they're always looking for skilled contractors. I nearly fell off the step stool I was standing on. Are you serious? Absolutely. The craftsmanship in those photos was exceptional. If you can do that kind of work consistently, I could keep you pretty busy on weekends. My clients pay well for quality work. I'd never considered turning my DIY skills into a proper side gig. I'd done odd jobs for friends before, but nothing formal. I'd definitely be interested, I said, my mind racing with possibilities. We arranged to meet the following weekend so she could show me one of the properties her clients were working on. By the end of that meeting, I had a contract to renovate a bathroom and kitchen in a house they were flipping. The pay was good, really good, and they would provide all the materials. Just bring your tools and your skills, Julie told me with a smile. And if this works out, there's plenty more where this came from. Just like that, I had a new source of income doing something I was good at and enjoyed. The irony wasn't lost on me. If Mom hadn't tried to screw me over, I never would have discovered this opportunity. Speaking of Mom, I was still getting regular updates from Aunt. Apparently, Mom had taken out that home equity loan and was now in the process of replacing everything I'd removed. But she'd run into problems. The contractor she hired is charging her an arm and a leg, Aunt reported. And apparently, they damaged some of the flooring while installing the new appliances, so that needs to be repaired too. I winced despite myself. The flooring had been one of the most time-consuming parts of the renovation. That's unfortunate. She's also discovered that she can't get the same model of refrigerator you installed. It's been discontinued. The replacement doesn't fit the space quite right, so they had to modify the cabinetry. Each new problem added to the cost and delayed the project further. Meanwhile, the cottage sat empty, generating no income. It was a financial hole that kept getting deeper. Around the 1-month mark after moving out, I received a text message from Mom. It was the first direct contact since I'd left. I think we got off on the wrong foot, it read. Maybe we can talk and figure something out that works for both of us. I showed it to my friend when he came over to check out my new place. Translation. I realize I screwed up and now I'm hemorrhaging money, he said with a snort. Pretty much, I agreed. What do you think I should do? He looked at me seriously. Do you want a relationship with your mom going forward? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Part of me did. She was my mother, after all. But the betrayal still felt raw, and I wasn't convinced she was actually sorry. Just sorry that her plan had backfired. I don't know, I admitted. Not right now, anyway. Then don't respond yet. See if she's actually remorseful or just trying to cut her losses. I took his advice and didn't reply. Sure enough, a few days later, I got another text. The cottage renovations are almost complete. I'm willing to offer you a reduced rent of $1,200 a month, which is very fair for a property of this quality. I showed this message to my friend, too, who burst out laughing. Wow, she still doesn't get it, does she? I shook my head, a mixture of amusement and sadness washing over me. Nope, she really doesn't. I ignored that message, too, which led to a third text a week later. Fine, $1,000 a month, but that's my final offer. The place is sitting empty, and I need a tenant. This time, I did respond. I kept it simple and professional. Thanks for the offer, but I've signed a lease elsewhere. I wish you luck finding a tenant. Her reply came almost instantly. Where are you living? Is it safe? You know rentals in this area are overpriced and poorly maintained. I didn't bother responding. My new place might be small, but it was clean, well-maintained, and most importantly, no one was trying to exploit me here. A few days later, Aunt called with an update. Your mom listed the cottage for rent yesterday, asking $1,700 a month. I nearly choked on my coffee. $1,700? For that location? That's insane. I know, I told her the same thing. She says that's what her friend told her it's worth. Her friend isn't a real estate professional, is she? Nope. Just someone who thinks she knows everything about everything. I shook my head. Well, good luck to her. 2 weeks passed, and according to Aunt, Mom hadn't received a single inquiry about the rental. She lowered the price to $1,600, then $1,500, but still no bites. Meanwhile, my side gig renovating houses was taking off. The first job had gone so well that Julie's clients immediately hired me for 2 more properties. I was working every weekend and some evenings, but the money was fantastic. At this rate, I'd be able to rebuild my savings in no time. One Saturday, I was at a home improvement store picking up supplies for my latest project when I ran into my mother. It was bound to happen eventually in a town this size, but it still caught me off guard. She looked tired and noticeably older than the last time I'd seen her. When she spotted me, her eyes widened in surprise. "Well, hello," she said, her voice stiff. "Hi," I replied, equally formal. An awkward silence stretched between us. She glanced at my cart, filled with high-end tiles and fixtures. "Doing another renovation?" she asked, a hint of bitterness in her tone. I nodded. Side job. Turns out people are willing to pay good money for quality renovation work. Her expression tightened. I see. Another uncomfortable pause. "How's the cottage?" I finally asked, though I already knew the answer from Aunt. Mom's face fell slightly. "Still vacant. The rental market isn't what it used to be, I guess." I bit back the urge to point out that her asking price was the problem, not the market. Instead, I simply nodded. "Well, I should get going," I said, preparing to push my cart away. "Wait," Mom said, her voice suddenly less certain. "How are you doing? Where are you staying?" "I'm fine," I replied. "Got a nice studio apartment, and plenty of work." She hesitated, then asked, "Would you ever consider coming back? To the cottage, I mean. We could renegotiate the terms." I looked at her for a long moment. Was this an olive branch? Or just another business proposition? "I don't think that would be a good idea," I said finally. "Too much water under the bridge." Her expression hardened again. "Fine. I was just trying to help you out. That studio must be tiny compared to what you could have had." And there it was. Not an apology or an acknowledgement of what she'd done, but another attempt to make me feel like I was missing out, like I should be grateful for whatever scraps she offered. "I'm doing just fine on my own, Mom. Have been for a while now. Good luck with the cottage." I walked away, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. She still didn't get it. Maybe she never would. Later that day, I received another barrage of texts from her, alternating between guilt trips. "After everything I've done for you," and backhanded offers. "I'm willing to overlook what you did to the cottage if..." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on my work, my new apartment, and building a life that didn't depend on her approval or support. About 2 months after moving out, I heard from Aunt that Mom had finally found a tenant for the cottage. The rent? $950 a month, barely enough to cover her new loan payments for the replacement appliances and fixtures. "She's still fuming about it," Aunt told me. "Says she's losing money every month." "That's a shame," I said, not feeling particularly sympathetic. "And get this. Her friend, the one who convinced her to try to squeeze more money out of you, she just moved away. Apparently, her husband got a job in another state. Very convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" I couldn't help but laugh. Very convenient indeed. By the 3-month mark, my side gig had grown so much that I was considering quitting my day job to do renovations full-time. Julie had introduced me to several more clients, and word of mouth was bringing in even more work. I was earning nearly double what I made at my regular job, and I enjoyed it far more. My studio apartment was no longer just a temporary landing spot. I'd made it truly comfortable, with some unique touches that showcased my skills. My landlord was so impressed with the small improvements I'd made, with his permission, of course, that he offered me reduced rent in exchange for doing similar work on his other properties. Life was good. Better than good, actually. Despite the painful experience with Mom, or perhaps because of it, I'd found a new path that was more fulfilling and profitable than I could have imagined. One evening, as I was finishing up some estimates for a new client, I received an unexpected text from Mom. "I need to talk to you, in person. It's important." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the distance that had been protecting me from further hurt. But another part was curious. What could be so important that she needed to see me face to face? After careful consideration, I texted back. "I'm busy with work most days. What's this regarding?" Her response came quickly. "The cottage, and us. Please, just give me 30 minutes of your time." I sighed heavily. The cottage again. Always business with her. But the mention of us gave me pause. Maybe, just maybe, she'd had some genuine reflection. "Fine," I replied. "Tomorrow afternoon, 4 p.m., at the coffee shop downtown, 30 minutes. The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop right on time, a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Mom was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She'd remembered how I take mine, a small detail that shouldn't have touched me as much as it did. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. I nodded but didn't say anything, waiting for her to get to the point. She took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. About what happened with the cottage. About how I treated you." I raised an eyebrow but remained silent. "The tenant I found," she continued, "they're problematic. Always complaining about something or other. Late with the rent half the time. Nothing like what you would have been." "Is that an apology or a business assessment?" I asked coolly. She flinched slightly. "Both, I suppose." She paused, then added, "I was wrong. What I did to you was wrong. I got caught up in the idea of making money, of treating the property as an investment rather than what it really was, a home for my child. My friend filled my head with all these ideas about property values and rental income, and I lost sight of what was really important." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely remorseful. "The cottage is sitting half empty most of the time now," she continued. "The tenant barely has any furniture. It's nothing like how beautiful it looked when you finished it. And every time I go there to fix something or collect rent, I'm reminded of what I threw away, not just a good tenant, but my relationship with my son." I felt a lump forming in my throat but pushed it down. "What exactly are you saying, Mom?" She met my eyes directly. "I'm saying I'm sorry, truly sorry. What I did was unforgivable. And I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to speak to me again. But I miss you. Not the renovation work you did or the tenant you could have been. I miss my son." I sat back, trying to process her words. They seemed sincere, but I'd been burned before. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But I don't know if things can ever go back to how they were. You really hurt me, Mom. You took advantage of my trust and my hard work." "I know," she said softly. "And I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I'd like a chance to rebuild. Slowly. On your terms." I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to think. "What about the cottage? Is this conversation leading up to another offer for me to rent it?" She shook her head firmly. "No. The cottage isn't part of this. I've made a mess of that situation, and I'll deal with it. This is about you and me. Our relationship." That surprised me. Maybe she had changed, or at least begun to understand the magnitude of her mistake. "I'll need time," I said finally. "This isn't something I can decide right now." "Of course," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As I left the coffee shop that day, I felt oddly lighter. Mom's apology hadn't magically fixed everything, but it was a start. A small crack in the wall that had formed between us. Over the next few weeks, we began a cautious reconciliation. Small text messages here and there. A brief phone call to share news. Nothing major, nothing that risked reopening old wounds, but enough to keep the door cracked open. Meanwhile, I made a decision about my career. With the steady stream of renovation work coming in, I gave notice at my day job and took the leap into full-time contracting. It was scary but exhilarating. For the first time, I was fully in control of my professional life. 6 months after the cottage incident, my renovation business was thriving. I had more work than I could handle on my own, and was considering hiring an assistant. My little studio apartment, while still cozy, was starting to feel cramped with all my tools and materials. I began looking for a larger place, maybe something with a garage I could convert into a workshop. During this time, my relationship with Mom continued to evolve slowly. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, keeping the conversations light and avoiding the topic of the cottage. It was a fragile truce, but better than the Cold War we'd been waging before. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from my aunt. "Have you talked to your mom lately?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Not for a couple of weeks. Why?" She sighed deeply. "The tenant at the cottage stopped paying rent 3 months ago. Your mom has been trying to evict them, but you know how slow the legal system can be. In the meantime, she's still on the hook for the loan payment she took out to replace everything." "That's unfortunate," I said, unsure how else to respond. I felt bad for Mom, but it was hard to muster too much sympathy given how we'd ended up here. "There's more," Aunt continued. "She went by the property yesterday to check on things, and the tenant has completely trashed the place. Holes in the walls, broken fixtures, even some water damage from a leak they never reported." My stomach dropped. Despite everything, I still felt a connection to that cottage. I'd poured my heart and soul into renovating it, and the thought of someone destroying that work hurt more than I expected. "Is she okay?" I asked. "Financially, not really. She's struggling to make the loan payments without the rental income, and now she's looking at thousands more in repairs. Emotionally, she's devastated. She keeps saying this is karma for how she treated you." I sat with that information for a while after hanging up. Part of me thought Mom was right. This was karma. But another part of me felt genuinely bad for her. No matter what she'd done, I didn't want to see her suffer like this. A few days later, I was driving past Mom's street and found myself turning into her driveway on impulse. We hadn't planned to meet, but something told me I should check on her. She answered the door looking tired and drawn. Her surprise at seeing me quickly turned to cautious pleasure. "This is unexpected," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I heard about the cottage," I said as I walked into the familiar living room. "Aunt told me what happened." Mom's shoulders slumped. "Of course she did." She gestured for me to sit. "It's a mess, the whole thing, and it's entirely my fault." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her candor. If I hadn't been so greedy, if I had just stuck to our original agreement, none of this would have happened, she continued. "You would have been a perfect tenant, the cottage would still be beautiful, and I wouldn't be facing financial ruin." "Financial ruin? Is it that bad?" She nodded grimly. "I took out that equity loan to replace everything you took, which you had every right to take," she added hastily. "The payments are substantial. I was counting on the rental income to cover them, but now," she trailed off, staring at her hands. "Have you seen the cottage since the tenant trashed it?" I asked. "Once. I couldn't bear to go back. It's like seeing all your hard work destroyed twice. First when you removed everything, which again, you had every right to do, and now with this damage." I considered her words carefully. This was the most accountable I'd ever seen her. No excuses, no deflection, just raw honesty. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said finally. She looked up, surprised. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who should be apologizing, over and over." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened between us filling the room. "Would you—" I started, then hesitated. Was I really going to suggest this? "Would you like me to take a look at the cottage, assess the damage? I could at least give you an estimate of what it might cost to repair." Her eyes widened. "You would do that? After everything?" "Just to look," I clarified. "No promises beyond that." "I would appreciate that more than you know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. The next day, we met at the cottage. I braced myself as Mom unlocked the door, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The place was a disaster. Garbage everywhere, stains on the floors I'd so carefully installed, holes punched in the drywall, cabinet doors hanging off their hinges. The bathroom was the worst. The toilet looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months, and there was clear water damage around the shower. "The tenant left last week after I finally got the eviction order," Mom explained, her voice hollow. "This is after they, quote, cleaned up." I walked through each room, taking notes and photos on my phone. My professional eye assessed the damage, while my heart ached for the destruction of my work. Well? Mom asked when I'd finished my inspection. New. I showed her the notes on my phone. Materials alone would be around $7,000. If you hire someone to do the repairs, you're looking at another $10,000 minimum in labor. She paled. I don't have that kind of money. Not after the loan and the lost rent. I could see her doing the math in her head, trying to figure out if she could take out another loan or maybe sell something to cover the costs. What if? I started, surprising myself. What if I did the repairs? Her head snapped up. What? I could do the work, I said slowly, still processing the idea myself. I'd charge you for materials at cost, no markup. And I'd do the labor for free. Why would you do that? She asked, clearly stunned. After how I treated you. It was a good question. Why would I help her? Maybe because despite everything, she was still my mother. Maybe because I hated seeing my hard work destroyed. Or maybe because I was in a position to be generous now, to take the high road in a way she hadn't been able to. Let's call it a fresh start, I said. But I have conditions. Of course, anything, she said quickly. First, we need a written agreement this time. Clear terms, no room for misunderstanding. She nodded eagerly. Absolutely. I've learned that lesson the hard way. Second, once the cottage is repaired, I get to decide what happens with it. Her eyebrows shot up. What do you mean? I mean, I decide if it gets rented out again, and to whom, or if it's used for something else entirely. She hesitated. It's still my property legally. Yes, it is. But if I'm going to invest my time and expertise in fixing it, again, then I want some control over what happens to it afterward, to protect my investment, so to speak. She winced at my choice of words but nodded. That's fair. What else? Finally, I want us to really work on rebuilding our relationship. Not just casual coffee meetups where we avoid the hard topics. Real conversations. Maybe even with a family therapist if needed. Her eyes welled up. I would like that very much. We shook hands. A formal gesture that felt strange between mother and son, but appropriate given our history. Then, surprising both of us, she pulled me into a hug. I don't deserve your help, she whispered. But I'm so grateful for it. I stiffened at first, then slowly returned the hug. Let's not mess it up this time. Over the next 2 months, I spent my weekends and some evenings repairing the cottage. Mom helped where she could, mainly with cleaning and painting. We worked together in a way we hadn't since I was a kid, building something tangible while simultaneously rebuilding our relationship. As we worked, we talked. Really talked. About why she had listened to her friend over me. About my feelings of betrayal and her regret. About the complicated dynamics that had always existed in our relationship. I think I've always been a bit intimidated by you, she admitted one day as we installed new cabinet doors. You're so capable, so independent. You remind me of your father in that way. My father had left when I was young. It wasn't a comparison she'd made before. I didn't know that, I said, measuring carefully to ensure the door hung straight. When you transformed this cottage, I saw what you were capable of, and it scared me a little. Like you didn't need me anymore. And then when my friends started talking about the value you'd added, I think part of me wanted to reassert some control. That doesn't excuse what you did, I said, but without heat. No, it doesn't, she agreed. Nothing excuses that. But understanding why I did it might help us move forward. And slowly, we did move forward. The cottage came back to life under our hands. Not quite as perfect as my first renovation, but solid and clean and functional once more. When we finished the repairs, I faced a decision about what to do with the property. I'd been thinking about it throughout the renovation process, weighing different options. I have a proposal, I told Mom over dinner at her house, the night after we'd completed the final repairs. I'm listening, she said, setting down her fork. I think we should turn the cottage into an Airbnb. She looked surprised. Really? I hadn't considered that. It makes sense, I explained. Short-term rentals in this area can bring in more money than a traditional long-term lease. It's a more hands-on approach, but with me handling the maintenance and you managing the bookings, we could make it work. We? She asked, cautiously. Yes, we. As in, we split the profits. After the loan payment, of course. She studied me for a moment. Why would you want to go into business with me again? after what happened last time. Because this time we have everything in writing, I said with a small smile. And because I think we've both learned some valuable lessons. Mom considered the proposal. If we did this, how would we split the profits? 50-50, I said. You own the property, I've done all the renovations, and I'll handle ongoing maintenance. Seems fair? She nodded slowly. It does seem fair, and it would certainly help with my financial situation. She paused. But are you sure you want to tie yourself to this property again? You're doing so well with your business. I am, I acknowledged. But the cottage was always special to me. And this way, I can keep an eye on it, make sure no one trashes it again. And keep an eye on me, she added wryly. I laughed. That too. We shook on the deal, and then drafted a formal agreement, which we both signed. I even had my lawyer friend look it over to make sure everything was clear and fair. Within a month, we had the cottage listed on several short-term rental platforms. Mom had done her research and staged the place beautifully with secondhand furniture she'd found online. The photos looked great and bookings started coming in almost immediately. Our first guests were a couple celebrating their anniversary. They left a glowing review, praising the charming cottage and its thoughtful amenities. More positive reviews followed, and soon we were booked solid for the next 3 months. The income was better than either of us had expected. After covering the loan payment and setting aside money for maintenance and supplies, we were each taking home a nice profit. For Mom, it was a financial lifeline. For me, it was a satisfying side income on top of my contracting business. About a year after our Airbnb venture began, I found myself in a position to buy a property of my own. My business had continued to grow, and I'd saved aggressively. I'd long since moved out of the studio apartment into a larger rental, but I was ready for something more permanent. I found a fixer-upper with great bones in a neighborhood I liked. The price was right because it needed significant work, but that was no deterrent to me. If anything, it was a selling point. On the day I closed on the house, Mom brought me a housewarming gift, a framed photo of the cottage as it looked after my first renovation. To remind you of what you're capable of, she said, handing me the frame. And to remind me never to take that for granted again. I hung the photo in my new home office, where I could see it as I worked on plans for my own renovation. It served as both a reminder of a painful lesson and a symbol of how far we'd come. Over the next 6 months, I transformed my fixer-upper into my dream home, using all the skills I'd honed through my business. I built a custom workshop in the garage, designed a kitchen that would make professional chefs jealous, and created a comfortable, stylish living space that perfectly suited my needs. Meanwhile, the cottage Airbnb continued to thrive. Mom had really found her niche in hospitality, going above and beyond for guests and maintaining the cottage with meticulous care. Our business partnership was solid, built on clear communication and mutual respect, things that had been missing the first time around. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my newly renovated home, sharing a bottle of wine and going over the cottage's booking calendar, Mom turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about how differently things could have turned out?" she asked. If I hadn't been so foolish about the cottage, I considered the question. Sometimes. If we'd stuck to the original plan, I'd have been living in the cottage these past 2 years, probably still working my old job. Instead of running your own successful business and owning this beautiful home, she added, gesturing to the house behind us. Instead of that, I agreed. It's strange to think that my terrible decision ultimately led to something positive for you. I took a sip of wine. I don't know if I'd go that far. It was a painful experience that could have permanently damaged our relationship. We got lucky. Not luck, she corrected. Your generosity. Your willingness to give me a second chance. Most people wouldn't have done what you did, helping me repair the cottage after everything. Maybe not, I conceded. But I'm glad I did. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Me too. I'm so proud of the man you've become. Successful, generous, principled. No mother could ask for more. Her words warmed me more than I expected. Despite everything we'd been through, hearing her express pride in me still mattered. And I'm proud of you too, I told her. For owning your mistake. For doing the work to rebuild our relationship. Not everyone would have done that either. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. So, Mom said eventually, a teasing note entering her voice. Now that you've conquered this renovation, what's next? Another fixer-upper? Maybe one to flip this time? I smiled, considering. Actually, I've been thinking about expanding the business. Maybe hiring a couple of employees, taking on bigger projects. That sounds exciting, she said. And ambitious. It is. But I've learned I'm capable of more than I thought. You always were, she said softly. I just didn't always see it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. From betrayal to reconciliation, from employee to business owner, from renter to homeowner. It hadn't been an easy path, but sitting here now, I knew I wouldn't change it. The cottage incident, painful as it was, had pushed me out of my comfort zone and into a life I might never have found otherwise. And while I wouldn't recommend family betrayal as a growth strategy, I had to admit it had ultimately worked out for the best. Mom and I still had our moments of tension, old patterns that sometimes resurface in stressful situations. But we now had the tools and the willingness to work through those moments to communicate honestly and respect each other's boundaries. The cottage that had nearly torn us apart had, in the end, become a symbol of our rebuilt relationship, stronger, more honest, and built to last. And as for me, well, I'd gone from feeling exploited and betrayed to running my own successful business, owning my dream home, and maintaining a profitable side venture. If that's not coming out on top, I don't know what is. Update, 8 months later. It's been a while since I shared my story, and I figured you all might like to know how things turned out in the long run. My renovation business has absolutely exploded in the last few months. Remember how I mentioned expanding? Well, I now have 4 full-time employees, and we're booked solid for the next 6 months. I've had to turn down work, which is a great problem to have. The biggest change, though, is that I'm now doing full property flips. I buy rundown houses, renovate them completely, and sell them for a profit. I've completed 2 so far, and both sold within days of listing, for well above asking price. I'm working on my 3rd now, and it's going to be my best work yet. As for the cottage Airbnb, it's still going strong. We've achieved superhost status on the platform, and our occupancy rate is over 90%. The income from that venture alone would be enough to live on comfortably, but combined with my business earnings, I'm in the best financial position of my life. Mom and I have settled into a good rhythm with managing the cottage. She handles the bookings, guest communications, and day-to-day operations, while I take care of maintenance and any repairs needed. We've even expanded our partnership in a way. She started helping me stage the houses I flip for sale, and she has a great eye for it. Our relationship continues to strengthen. We still have our therapy sessions once a month. More as maintenance now rather than repair. It's been amazing to develop an adult relationship with my mother based on mutual respect rather than the lopsided dynamic we had before. There was one incident about 3 months ago that really showed me how much things have changed. Mom's friend, the one who originally put the idea in her head to try to squeeze more money out of me, moved back to town. She immediately tried to reinsert herself into Mom's life, but this time Mom saw right through her manipulative behavior. She asked me if I was still wasting the cottage on an Airbnb instead of maximizing its potential, Mom told me, rolling her eyes. I told her our arrangement was working perfectly for both of us, thank you very much, and that I wasn't interested in her advice anymore. The friend apparently didn't take the hint and kept pressing, suggesting Mom could easily raise the rates on the Airbnb and keep the extra money for herself. After all, she said, your son doesn't need to know exactly what guests are paying. Mom showed her the door and told her not to come back until she could respect our business partnership and rebuilt relationship. I can't tell you how proud I was when she told me this story. As for my own house, I've finally finished all the little projects I'd been putting off. It's truly my dream home now. I even built a small guest suite in the basement, which has come in handy when we have Airbnb guests who need to check out, but their next accommodation isn't ready yet. We've offered it as a courtesy a few times, and the gratitude and positive reviews have been well worth it. Looking back at where this all started, with Mom trying to charge me triple for the cottage renovation, it's almost hard to believe. That betrayal, which felt so devastating at the time, ultimately pushed me into a far better situation than I ever could have imagined. I'm now a successful business owner with multiple income streams, a beautiful home that I own outright, and most importantly, a healthy relationship with my mother, based on honest communication and respect. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Mom hadn't gotten greedy. I'd likely still be working my old job living in the cottage, And while that wouldn't have been a bad life, it certainly wouldn't be the one I have now. I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best outcomes, if we're resilient enough to work through them and wise enough to learn from them. Thanks for all the support when I first shared my story. For those dealing with family betrayal or difficult business situations, hang in there. Set boundaries, know your worth, and don't be afraid to walk away if someone isn't treating you fairly, even if that someone is family. You never know what better opportunities might be waiting on the other side. Anyway, thank you for watching. Plan.